Life's a coat of many colors. It is never black and white. Can't have one without the other. The dark without the light.
All right, so I'm Debbie Bratby.
I'm Cassandra Davies.
Forever blue, forever blue. I'm putting on a show for the world to see. No one will.
We're here with Christine Sodt, and we welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you.
And you may wonder why we would invite you into a podcast involving first responders. And the reason why I think, and Cassandra thinks, your story is important is that you're a guardian at more of the intimate setting.
Yes.
The genesis of where we come from, our families, that's how you get involved. And as first responders, like law enforcement, they deal with the symptoms. But what I see you doing is you deal with the cause, and that's in the home and the family. So tell me a little about the agency that you work for in Santa Clara County, and what kind of work do you do?
Sure. I work with a mental health agency in Santa Clara County that works with children and families that are having difficulty. The children usually have some behavioral issue that's of concern. Maybe the family can't deal with it. They might be in a foster home. And some of them, some of the youth that we serve are also involved with the juvenile justice system in Santa Clara County. And we are really working to provide the youth with skills that will better serve them and help them make better choices. And we're also in the home with them where their environment has an effect on them, where sometimes they're triggered by their environment, which includes sometimes it's siblings, sometimes it's parents themselves, sometimes it's just kind of the general setting that can be problematic for them, and those kind of cause triggers for problematic behaviors. And so we're going to provide support also in the environment for the family in order to help alleviate environmental triggers, alleviate some of those responses in personal interactions or any of the ways that these young children find themselves triggered.
That's wonderful, because with the prison ministry that I work with, a lot of the men talk about their early childhood development or lack of their environments. So you really are, it's like you're getting at the cause underlying the symptom.
Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're going to go in, talk to the youth and find out what their story is and what they find problematic. And sometimes it takes a little while for them to feel comfortable and safe and engage with us. And then we're talking to them about maybe some of the underlying pieces. We work with basic human needs. What are some of the basic human needs that either haven't been met in the past or are not currently being met? And those are things like connection, belonging, safety, security, power and control, having some say in their own life, and then that sense helping them find a way also to feel comfortable with their own competence. What areas are they interested in, and how can we build their confidence and their competence in various areas of their life so they can grow and feel stronger and like an agent of self-will, right? In making right choices and making positive changes that can support them. And it's one little step at a time, but we're definitely working with some of the root causes. And that's why we are with the families. A lot of parents of these youth have had it's a generational issue, right? They sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's very much a generational issue. So we're then talking to the parents at times about their trauma. What have they missed? And how is that showing up in their parenting, and and how that might be affecting their child or teen.
And walk us through how someone come into that environment that you handle. I mean, was it a court notification, or how do you?
So we're a fairly high level program. We are a high level program in terms of dealing with high risk youth. Sometimes they're referred, sometimes they've had services from lower level programs where they're not as intensive services. They may not be going to their home. They may start out with therapy or whatever. If they have either a social worker or a probation officer, they refer them to a committee in Santa Clara County that then makes the referral to our agency. So you can't just call a county mental health line to be referred to our program, but if the youth find themselves or the parents find themselves dealing with a youth that's in the foster care system, sometimes they are at home with their family, but they're in family maintenance, for example. The case is still being overseen by the county, and then their social worker can make the referral to our agent, to our program. There's numerous different lower level programs that will often, kind of say, okay, we know this service exists at this high level, so we want to be able to tell the social worker and probation officer that this youth needs a little more support than what we're providing, at this current level. So that's how they come to be referred to our program.
So you're responding to some sort of a kind of a crisis?
Yes. It's not uncommon for them to be in crisis, especially if they're just coming out of the hall, juvenile hall. There's a very specific reason they were in the hall, and now they're returning to the home. We're hoping to stabilize the home situation, make sure that's, stable enough that this youth isn't going to just automatically, reoffend or, anything like that.
So I would like to get on a more personal basis, like your own personal story. Where you went to school, what you studied. Did you even think you would be where you are now in your life? So if you take us through some early part of your life and your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out college slow. I, went to college for the first year and then started traveling around the country doing this really fun job, and just wanted to stay with that for a while. And then I settled in Florida for a while and went to college there at a junior college. Then I went to University of Illinois when I lived in Chicago for a while, and just kind of slowly first put the bachelor's together and finished it at a college called Pacific Oaks in Pasadena, California. It's a small private college. And their theme was social and political context for human development. So we know that our lives are built based on where we come from and what kind of history our family has had and what kind of history that we've had. And so all the classes at Pacific Oaks when I was attending had to do with social political context. It didn't matter what the class was. There was always an element of social political context. And then there were some actual, courses as well. And then I went on to do my master's as well at Pacific Oaks and got a master's in Human Development, a specialty in teaching college. I also have an extensive background at the junior college level in child development. So I originally, when I decided on what I was going to do, started my own preschool and childcare. And I worked with the young ones and trying to provide an environment that gave them everything that they needed to be able to flourish and, become the best that they can be. And I did that for 18 years, worked with middle school age children because I would have them come sometimes and they would be like my junior helpers. So it helped them, have something to do after school that was useful and they could learn. And after 18 years of that, I went searching for a different kind of occupation, I guess, something just that, what's the next step? What do I want to do now? And within a short amount of time, someone turned me on to the agency that I currently work with in Santa Clara County that works with these high-risk youth. And what drew me to it was the values that they had. Their values were about providing individual services. It's not a cookie cutter kind of thing. It's based on who I'm sitting across from. The services that we're providing are based on what their vision is. What do they want for themselves? What are they interested in? And I was really drawn to the values. It's strengths based. It's culturally sensitive as much as we all can be, right? And the values of this agency just spoke to me. And so I said, I need to jump into this. And so that's how I became drawn to this work. And it was a brand new start completely. I had to learn a whole new set of skills to work with this population. Here I had been working with little ones and in basically healthy families and in, upper middle class environment, and my switch brought me to a very different, population in the city, if you will, in the family setting, and they were having difficulty. So there were definitely behavioral issues, and so I learned a whole new set of skills to be able to respond to the behavioral crisis that they might be in. I became 5150 certified in Santa Clara County to be able to, if I needed to, keep youth from harming themselves or others, or not, if they weren't able to take care of themselves for some reason, then, I would be that first responder at that time. And then we would partner with the police and anybody else that we needed to, and if they needed to be hospitalized for a while. So just got to a whole different place, very much so.
Well, and I had talked to you previously, and you mentioned something about working with women, incarcerated women.
Oh, yes, that was one of my friends who works in this business was also, their company was teaching parenting for low and mid-level offenders at Elmwood. And they were teaching, they'd offer a class for the women, and then the children would be brought in for the last hour of the visit. So it was like 2 hours where we spent an hour working where the women came to us, and, I provided kind of parenting skills and all the various social issues we discussed also that influence how they parent, how that affects the child. Also providing, because my background is in child development and human development, providing them with the feedback of what do their children need at this, in order to thrive and grow and become healthy citizens, and healthy human beings that could reach their full potential. And so that was fascinating. I found the vast majority of them were very sincere in wanting to learn, were very open to taking feedback when they were with their children. If we observed things that we felt, maybe they could do differently, we provided coaching for them and worked on their parenting skills. And I loved that population. I really did.
Well, the example that these women had of parenting, there really was no good model of parenting skills, so they would probably parent as they were parented.
And some of them absolutely do. Some of them actually came from fairly functional homes and then ended up, maybe using drugs, which then skews our behaviors so far out of our norm that then the environment that they're raising their children, of course, becomes toxic. So sometimes they did have some skills. And it really only takes one of the parents to actually be missing, or to affect a child in terms of their development. So I'm very careful and not to always pin it on the parents. I really am, because one person would be affected by a family environment in one way, and the sibling affected in a totally different way. So I've seen it where maybe one child is the one that ends up absorbing whatever problems might be, but others are totally fine. And so I try to be really careful and not just pinning it on parents, but there's a lot of extenuating circumstances sometimes that create family environments that are difficult. But it is true. There are many of the parents did not have the parenting that would have been a role model for them to be able to then parent their own children in a healthy way.
Well, I commend you for doing the job that you do in your staff. I hope you let them know what we're doing and that we include them in that first responders trauma.
Right.
Because they're exposed to things that they probably, it's similar to a social worker.
Exactly.
Come in with these high ideas and you want to help these people, and oftentimes you can feel like you're pounding your head against the wall and nothing ever changes. But I wonder if there's a family that you can describe someone that went through the process, that there was a really positive outcome, because we only hear of the negative and how awful things are. But I wonder if you have any uplifting stories about.
The truth is, there are many uplifting stories. I can tell you one of the youths that we worked with, who had been in the hall, came out very. They have to have a hard shell. They develop a hard shell oftentimes if they've done time in the hall more than once or twice. So it may take a long time to build any kind of trust with them. And this youth, came out, was just like putting us off, didn't want to meet with us, didn't want to talk to us. And over time of continually meeting with us, and we actually work as a team. So there's somebody that's the social worker, caseworker, and then there's people that work one-on-one with these youth. And the one-on-one behavior specialist people have that opportunity to build that rapport and trust with them, and then engaged this youth in boxing, and really, we supported them. We set boundaries around what this is about. It's not about picking fights with people but to provide that opportunity for this youth to build some confidence in some area. And sometimes self-protection, knowing that you can protect yourself, is really important. And this youth was able to find that there's another way that they can use fighting or self-defense skills that builds up their confidence. So this particular youth, then went on and we supported them in finding other things that he could be successful at. So they often, many of our youth don't want to go to school. They're not going to school, so we supported this youth getting to school. Sometimes we show up at their door in the morning to help them get there, and drive them there if that's needed, or support the parent in making sure that they get there. And in this case, the youth was supported in going to school every day. And sometimes we only have to do that for a week or two. Sometimes we'll do it 3 days a week. And this youth had that opportunity to be, supported in getting to school every day. And they started thriving. The grades went from D's and F's to, B's and C's, some A's. And we worked with the parents also to find ways to turn phrases around instead of becoming, kind of accusational, but to come from that place of understanding and compassion for the youth. These parents had high expectations for this child and really wanted to have him succeed. And of course, when you get frustrated, or when you don't maybe have enough money for all the bills this month, it just starts coming out in a negative way. So then we provided some coaching for the parents to use some different skills. And sometimes it's also just leaving them alone. In this case, this youth really needed to be able to say, I need to go to my room and take space. And we have to coach parents to allow the youth to walk away. There doesn't have to get resolved right now. This youth needs time and to take space. So the parents and this youth over time learned what works. How do they disengage? Because usually neither will back down. As you know, teens are totally into thinking they're working towards independence, right? This is the time to learn the skills I need to get out of here. So oftentimes the words are, just leave me alone and I'll take care of it, right? And sometimes it's not quite that nice a verbiage, but that's the message, just leave me alone. And so we learn to help them disengage, and then this youth learned that he was able to do these things on his own, and the parents started to trust the youth in being able to take the lead and not feeling like they had to yell at him and engage in arguments with him in order to get him to move. So the home became quieter, more peaceful. When our program walks, kind of graduates the person, we're transitioning them to something that's sustainable for them. The skills that we leave behind are sustainable to keep this family going. Sometimes they backslide, but they've always have those skills now to move them forward. And so what we do in our programs is we then transition the youth out of our program in what's called a successful, way. And so that's what happened with this one particular youth, that just, he started taking care of his own things, his own responsibilities, and saw that he was competent and confident in those areas and really could, handle it on his own. And once they feel, comfortable in their own skin, and that they have a way to take space, they have a way to be successful, they have a way to reach their goals, then their whole beingness just lightens up.
It's a great story. Great one.
Yeah.
So you have people working under you, first responders.
Yes.
So I'm interested in how do they, or is there something that supports them in the stresses that they might encounter?
So we are well aware in this field that being first on the front lines, that we are very susceptible to a secondary trauma. And so becomes a part of what we talk about as well for each other, making sure that it's not uncommon for mental health programs to actually provide a fair amount of time for their employees to, take the time that they need, whether it's vacation days or sick days and like that. So there's sometimes some pretty healthy benefits in that way, but it's really not just a benefit to go, hang out on the beach of Hawaii, but it really does have to do with the mental health piece of really taking care of ourselves completely, physically, mentally, spiritually, in whatever way that we need to. And we actually support wellness in a lot of different ways. We'll have classes as well, have a day or two set aside just to talk about wellness and create our own wellness plans and like that. So
sounds like there's a lot of understanding about the need for self-care.
Yes.
And
yes.
freedom to talk about it.
Yes. Yes. As a manager, they have that opportunity to come into my office and just vent. And that's just what we ask them to feel free to do that, because it is difficult. We sometimes, the parents of these children are dealing with their own mental health issues, and of all types. And we're always having to be chameleons as well, because as first responders, we're not the first responders that just shows up and puts out a fire or shuts down a domestic violence situation. We're actually in their lives for, sometimes years, not usually, but sometimes a very long time. And so we're experiencing the full trauma in that family on ourselves, repeatedly. Okay, so that's very that gets very tiring, and we sometimes really do have a difficult time taking care of ourselves unless we can go into somebody's office, close the door, and vent. So that almost all the managers that I work with are very well aware of this and provide that safe space just to be able to say, what they need to say. And usually we're still trying to keep it strength-based, but sometimes we just have to be real and just say it, right?
When you say strength-based, what do you mean when you say that?
So what I mean by strength-based is, so let's say a youth is referred to my program. The first thing that we're going to ask them, and we'll ask their parents, and if they can have friends and family around them, whatever, we're going to ask them about the strengths of each of the people in that room. What are the strengths of, Johnny, or whoever, whatever the youth's name is, and we're finding out, first off, what do they love to do? What is one of their passions? For many of our youth, of course, it involves some kind of technology things. But then there's sometimes it is, I really want to be able to play football. I really want to be able to do something. So we support that. But then we also are looking for things like, oftentimes what we'll hear is they really do have a lot of compassion for their younger sisters, or they like to help mom in the kitchen cooking dinner, or the youth may have a particular strength, such as really strong social skills, to be able to make a friend at the drop of a hat, right? So we want to know what those are so that we can build on those strengths, so that then what we come up with is a plan that supports them with those strengths to overcome their challenges. So we use their strengths to help them overcome their challenges. And And the same with the parents. You know, a lot of the time, of course, we're looking at parents who love their kids, genuinely care about their children and their teens, and they want to do the best that they can. Um, so they're just that strength of being open to coaching, open to new ideas. That's a huge strength for a parent, you know, that has a youth in their home, you know, their child that needs that extra support for some to make right choices. So that's what I mean by strength based.
Wow, that's outstanding.
Yeah.
That's where the power comes from, really. I mean, you
Yeah.
can talk and talk and talk to a child or anybody, and if you're not touching them where they live, it doesn't.
It
just
doesn't matter.
it's words. It just falls to
Right.
the wayside.
Oh yeah, you'll watch a kid just sit there and
Tune out.
Yeah, they're gone. They're totally, completely gone and shut down until, you know, they can tell their story. So there's has to be a lot of opportunity for them to tell their story and have somebody literally see them
To be
and
seen.
to be seen and then accepted. You know, we tell both the parents and the youth, I don't care what you've done. I'm not here to judge that in any way, shape, or form. I am here to help if you want to make some changes, if you're open to that. And that's what I'm here to help you with. I have no judgment because I didn't walk in your shoes. I don't know what that was like for you, except for what you tell me. And when they tell us, then it's an honor, right? We're taking their story in as an honor that somebody is willing to share and be vulnerable with us.
Yeah.
But we have to work with their own vision, their own goals. It's for our youth. A lot of the times, you know, it's just, I just want to be off probation. That's their whole goal, period. So then you go, okay, so right now that's where all your energy's going. You know, then we're going to use that though as the motivation. It's like, okay, wait, you're doing this behavior, but you already know that that's going to keep you on probation, right? So you're going to make a choice. You're the only one that can make this choice. Nobody can make it for you. Is if this is really the choice that you want is to get off probation, then this other behavior, which you are thoroughly enjoying at this time, but is going to keep you on probation, you might need to look at it again to see whether this is really helpful to you in your reaching your goal. So, yeah. Did I hit it?
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Okay.
you did.
Okay.
Being seen and being heard.
Yes,
and
exactly.
not being
Exactly.
judged.
Exactly. No
I mean,
judgment.
We could take that into all of us taking that into our lives, into the world. We'd have a very different world.
Right.
I think.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
Now, when you talk about, I know that foster care ends at 18, and a lot of kids are just dumped out into the world. Bye bye, good luck, adios. But your program goes beyond 18.
So
Right.
the truth is, in the state of California now, they can extend their foster care services beyond 18 to 21. So they can, but they have to volunteer for it. It's their choice. Do you want continued help? Because they can have help getting to college. They can help paying for college. There's help for them beyond 18 now. They might be in a housing unit that's just for transition age youth. But there are also transition age youth programs out there that are specifically just for transition age youth. Our program is not specifically for transition age youth, but there are programs out there just for that age group to really help them. And that's, one of the last stages of, not the last stages of child development now is it doesn't just go from adolescence to adulthood. It actually, they've added another stage called emerging adulthood, which goes from 18 to 25. And that's a really critical stage because now you take the skills that you have and you're supposed to be able to apply it to your life to make it happen, right? But how many youth at 18, especially that we're working with, are going to have those skills. They're not. They're not going to have all the skills. They're going to have some of them. This one youth that I talked about found out that he could get good grades in school, and he found out that by taking boxing, he felt more confident, and didn't have to take on a persona of strength and, tough guy, but that he actually felt stronger. So, when those kinds of skills are given, that's the beginning. But then there's other skills they still have to learn to move into being able to make their own choices and make good choices. And they need help with that. You can't just, like you said, to draw, just at 18 to open the door and say, okay, you're free to go. It's like, well, free to go where?
To
Do what? Exactly. So that's where that transition age is really an important piece. There's still skill building, but it's less about behavioral. What do you do when you're triggered, and step by step, how do you make some good choices when you're triggered? Now they become a little more subtle and really are very much based on their strengths and their interests, and then just some coaching about what steps to take. Sometimes I coach my staff to build action plans with our youth. What does an action plan look like? What comes first? What's the first step, the second step? Because every goal is only, reached one step at a time. So sometimes they have to really realize that. A lot of the youth that we work with also have ADHD, which makes it very difficult because that impulsivity that comes with the ADHD really thwarts them slowing down enough to make good choices. But they also will look at the end, what the goal is, and they'll say, well, how am I going to get from where I'm at to that goal? That can't ever happen. So I'm just going to give up on it. But then if you break it down for them or help them realize that there's actually a way to get there one step at a time, then they have that tool to work with in those later years,
Well, even as an adult, I find it overwhelming sometimes when I look at the end result and think, how can I, there's no way I can do that. But if you break it up into baby steps,
That's right.
It's completely doable.
That's right.
So had I had that skill,
Right.
not that
Right.
I'm happy that this is available for people. I kind of wish that my parents had better skills, but they did what they did because that's all they knew.
Right.
And now we can know better.
Right.
To be better.
Right.
And you having your background in child development, what do you see as the most critical time in a child? If you could pick one time.
So if I could pick one time, it's going to be 0 to 3. The longer period would be 0 to 5. That's because the vast majority of brain development is happening in that time. It's because the basic human needs have to be met. They have to be, in order to be able to thrive, right? In order to be able to thrive. You can survive, but you're not necessarily going to thrive. So, and when I think about basic human needs, that's the first biggest ones early on are safety and security, right? The child's in a safe environment. But then the next one is connection and belonging, because we know that you can put a child into an orphanage and not have anybody touch them, and they will fail to thrive. Literally, they will die. Now, again, because every person's different and we all have a different temperament and personality and our own set of genes that do help mark the way for us, child in that same situation might, can make it or whatever. But it's so important that those 5 years, that basic foundation of that opportunity to explore, and so that they can feel confident and competent, that, that at an early age, they're starting, with parenting, we're asking parents to start giving them choices at, a very young age, and sometimes 2 to 3. That age of 2 is that age of I can do it myself age. So if you thwart the I can do it myself at 2, you're going to have a really difficult time with the youth later, because they have to have that sense that it's not just about being able to do it themselves, it's also being seen for who they are and what choice they're making. If it's not an unsafe choice, then there should be some support for it, right?
Mhm.
So, because what that tells the youth is you are being seen for who you are as an individual, wanting to make your own choice at 2. And parents do. They don't call it the terrible 2s for nothing. The terrible 2s are there because parents often have a misguided perception that they should be in control. And if they usurp all the control and all the options, they're dismissing this person as an individuated being. And so that's super, super important age too. So that's why I say those early years. But depending for everybody's, there is an element of individuality to that. If a child has great things happening at 5, they're going to be more likely to be able to get through trauma and drama later in their life. If they have had some trauma in their early years, they're going to have a much more difficult time surviving either ongoing trauma or even intermittent trauma in their life after that.
Well, that's interesting to me because as a parent and right in the heat of where my trauma was dealing in my own life, law enforcement, trying to control my daughter. And she was just being a typical teenager, even as a 2-year-old. I can remember being so frustrated with, I can't control my own child. How am I going to control the environment that I work in? So having the need to control is huge. And I think I had a distorted view of parenting, thinking that that's what you do. You control your kid. And
Right.
that I found out was not, thank goodness I had a partner who said, read a book. Read a book and educate
Yes.
yourself. And I'm telling you, I had a hard time. And what I would do is I would photocopy pages of this book that would tell me how to empower the child, yet still have control, like giving them choices. Now,
Yes.
3 choices. They're all choices I made up, but they feel like they had the power because they got to pick one of them.
Right.
So if I started to get frustrated, I'd go to the cabinet, open the cabinet, look at some techniques, and close the cabinet and go back and talk to my child. And I think that's a huge thing. There's a lot of abuse in first responders' homes because there's that control issue. I'm supposed to control everything. And I go home and I can't control this. And I start spinning out. And next thing you know, I've slapped my kid. Or I've verbally abused them and shut them down and made them cower and cry in their room.
Right.
And all I've done is to create a wall between us.
Right.
So I love that you said that.
Yeah.
What I have a really personal question is, why do you do what you do? Why?
I do it because, as they say, there is no manual for parenting. We are all doing it based on our history. Now, I did it based on my history until I started learning more about the right way to do it, right? So for me, I have incredible compassion for children that have not had what they needed in order to find peace within themselves, right? Even as a child, if you're in a home where the parents are perfectionists, you can never do anything well enough. That's a simple thing, right? I mean, let alone what huge trauma is, right? It's not unusual to be a perfectionist. But what we don't understand as parents is that when we set that standard, what you have at the end of the road is a youth with no self-confidence. So it's not about self-confidence, isn't about being in the highest class or the highest grade. It's about being able to follow through with your own dreams and wishes for yourself and self-determination. And for me, I want parents to be able to provide that for their children and their teens. I want them to be able to understand them well enough that they can treat them with the respect and the awe that they deserve. And I want those children to be able to experience that. And if a child is feeling bad about themselves because they've been in juvenile hall and they burglarized or they stole a car or whatever, that doesn't mean they're a bad person. That means they've made a bad choice. And that's said about parenting all the time. You have to make sure and distinguish between the two. But most of these children and teens have not had that opportunity to understand that. They haven't gotten the unconditional love that they needed. And unconditional love doesn't mean 24/7 for anybody. It's good enough. You have to have enough. You have to be able to come home often enough having made a mistake to get guidance and love, no matter that you've made a mistake. Once in a while, parents are going to lose it. It's going to happen. It doesn't matter. The best parents are going to make mistakes as parents. That's not the issue. It does have to happen often enough to be able for that youth to see themselves in their parents' eyes with love. That's what has to, and so that's why I keep bringing it. That's why I keep seeing parents. That's why I keep working with youth. I want them to know, I'm coming here because I care about you, but I don't say that because that's not what they wouldn't respond to. That doesn't mean anything to them. They don't know me from Adam. But all I have to do is I have to see who they are in the moment that I sit across from them and not judge them for what they've done. So that's why I do this work.
Well, I tell you, sitting in this room, as soon as you started talking about your why, it lit the place up. You lit up, your energy went up, and I'm so happy that you are doing the work you're doing because you have the passion, and that shows. Yeah. And I commend you for what you're doing. It's a really difficult job. It could be heart-wrenching at times. And here you sit, and I commend you, and I thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
It's really an honor to just, to get to know you and to see what your passion is. And I can really relate to what you say about the early development, the twos. That's really when the children are developing their will.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly.
And if we take that away from them,
right.
I think that's a huge disservice to take anyone's will away from them. That's one of the things that I had difficulty with being a correctional officer.
Right.
Because you throw someone in jail, all of their will is taken away.
Yes. And I think, the other piece for me is I also have a master's in divinity. So the spiritual life of every being is also important to me. And that's, seeing people from that point of view and knowing them as divine beings so that I have an instant love for, anybody that I'm working with, not because of who they are as much as that they are here. And that they deserve all that anyone deserves. Every person deserves all that any other person deserves. And so that's a huge part for me as well. It's just like, that's my ministry in a way. This is my ministry.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something that triggered in me, the them versus us. And if we can see one another as a divine being, as something special and beautiful, it'd be harder to abuse. It'd be harder to, in law enforcement, it'd be harder to shoot someone unarmed. I mean, you see the other in yourself, and it's a long journey for for someone to go from a very violent past to this place of understanding and seeing divine and beauty in every human being.
Right.
And that there's no such thing as evil. It's just bad choices. Someone made some really bad choices, or they didn't know better. Or
And they used the best tools that they had at hand.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it sometimes goes back to that story of stealing a loaf of bread, because you need to feed your family, right? I mean, that's kind of a metaphor for sometimes what the parents are doing. And when people find they can't find a way in the world, they're going to have to find a way outside of the world, in the sense that it's not socially acceptable. If they can't find, if all the doors are shut to them, what are they going to turn to? You have to have the doors open for everyone all the time, because when those doors are shut, they're going to do it in the only way they know how. And that is oftentimes against the way society wants you to do things. And I'm specifically not using it as antisocial. That's not what I mean. It's not a pathology. It's actually a survival tool. There is a pathology, but for some in that way. But for those the doors are just always shut, those people have to find a way to survive and do the best they can to thrive. And so, we have to look at ourselves as a society to find out what we have to open as many doors as possible for all people.
Amen.
Yeah.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Well, thank you. I can't say it loud enough or strongly enough.
Oh, you're
What
welcome.
I'm doing is it's really, really powerful. And it'll keep your clients from coming
To the adult.
to the other side.
That is definitely what we're aiming for. Definitely. What we do is sometimes just one small pearl
Stay
on a
safe, everybody.
strand to try and hope that that small change back at whenever time that youth came into our services, that it's enough to give them some hope, some possibilities. They can see possibilities in themselves.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.